be on mute. And I think actually when I just signed on, I got a message that due to the size of the group, people are automatically muted. So please do leave your microphone muted, as that will help everybody with their sound quality this evening. Also, you can feel free to turn off your camera if you want to. That puts less clutter on the screen, or you can leave it on if you prefer. If you're on a laptop or a desktop computer, in your screen, you can change your settings to have the spotlight setting as what you want, to be able to best see Leslie while she speaks. And if you are on a phone or a iPad or something, I think that's a little bit different, but you can play around with your settings. We will be recording this evening's presentation to make it available on our website later. And but the participants will not be shown, nor will your questions. So you can send me questions through chat. A few people did send questions ahead of time, which Leslie's going to answer with us. Or if you'd like to send a confidential question, then you can email me directly, which is betsy.norris@adoptionnetwork.org. It's BETSIE.norris@adoptionnetwork.org. And I can ask your question without identifying you. So Leslie is going to speak for about the first half of our time together, and then the second part of our time together will be question and answer. Let's see. So we created this series to create opportunities for community and exploration and some comfort as we all go through this difficult experience together right now. And the speakers in the series are generously volunteering their time. And as I mentioned, we will be posting recordings. We had Sharon Rosia 2 weeks ago tonight talking about grief and loss. And we had a problem recording her, but she's actually doing the same presentation again tomorrow for our staff. So thank you, Sharon, for your generosity. And we'll be recording that version of the presentation and putting it on our website. We had April Dinwiddie last week talking about exploring family culture. That recording is up on our website and I believe also out there on social media. We've got Leslie this evening, of course. And then next week, we've got author Kate Vogel talking about the ups and downs of your adoption story. You should write a book. I know we've all heard that. And we are in the process of lining up speakers for May, and we've got some tremendous people, and we're still working out the details. So probably late this week or early next week, you can watch for those details to come out. So now I have the pleasure of introducing Leslie Johnson, who's our presenter for this evening about dealing with stress and anxiety. Leslie is a family therapist, marriage and family therapist in Pasadena, California. She works with individuals, couples, adolescents, teenagers. Leslie has a special expertise working with members of the adoption and foster care community, and she provides a wide array of services, which I'm sure we'll hear a little bit more this evening about. And for anybody that might not be fully familiar with Leslie's work, I wholeheartedly recommend that you go to her website. She's actually got two. So one is lesliejohnson.com, and Leslie is LESLI Johnson.com. And then also askadoption.com. So you can check her out there. So with that, I'll give you to Leslie. Thank you.
Thanks, Betsy. The pleasure to be here. I wish I could see all of your faces. So hi, everyone. And when I was invited to present at this conference in person, my topic was promoting resilience, transforming trauma, promoting resilience, working with stress and anxiety. And I think it's even more relevant right now as we're all quarantining, and probably most of you are dealing with some level of grief, loss, stress, or anxiety. So I hope that what I have to offer tonight is helpful, both in the present and moving forward. It was funny because when I get anxious before I present, and I was talking with a good friend and colleague who may or may not, I don't know if she's on this call, but her name is Leslie as well, and she's a therapist, and she said, I think anxiety about presenting on anxiety is the paradoxical situation we're in right now. So I thought that was really funny. So as Betsy said, I'm an adoption-informed therapist and with a private practice in Pasadena, and I do a lot of virtual work. Well, I do all virtual work right now, but I work with individuals who were adopted, adoptive parents, first parents, and families. And I was adopted, and that is part of the reason that I wanted to work as an adoption-informed therapist to help other adoptees and other families have a different experience than I did growing up. I was in therapy from probably the time I think I was 12, and adoption was never part of what my therapist or I talked about. And so my goal as a therapist is really to help clients connect the dots of their story and develop a coherent narrative with the idea that what happened to us or what happened to you is important, but what's even more important is how you've come to understand yourself in the world as a result of what's happened. And we can do that when we connect the dots of our story and develop a coherent narrative. So tonight I'm going to share some practical ways that we can work to calm our nervous system. I'll be offering some internal resources as well as external resources, and then we'll do an actual exercise together. And then for a large part of the time, I just want to be able to answer any of your questions. So like Betsy said, you can message her, you can message me, and can also email her if you have a private question, and we'll do our best to get those all answered. So I also realize a few of my suggestions might be impossible right now to some of the resources that I talk about, but I'm going to try to tailor it for right now and also in the future. So again, we're working with ways to calm the nervous system. So people who have experienced trauma are often have a difficult time with regulation, self-regulation. They may be anxious, they may be prone to mood disorders, depression, or anxiety. And we do know that, again, what happened is important, but how we've come to view ourselves and the world is what we're focusing on. And also because of what we call neuroplasticity, the ability of the brain to change throughout a lifespan, there's so many things we can do to help promote resiliency and change the wiring of our brain to be more resilient. So in terms of what's happening right now, this time is what I'm hearing from my clients, all of them actually. It's a very, very difficult time because of some have already endured trauma. So members of our community, whether it be adopted people or people that were in foster care, first parents, adoptive parents, there's a likelihood that we've all endured some kind of trauma. And I was telling Betsy before this call that a lot of my clients who were adopted are saying to me, wow, I'm doing actually okay right now. And they're feeling really seen and heard and validated by their family members and their friends, because they're sharing, yeah, this is the anxiety that I've lived with, for a long time. This kind of level of anxiety, or a level of anxiety. So it's funny that some of them are dealing with this better than others. Others are expressing tremendous grief and loss. And there was an article in the New York Times, I think about a week and a half ago, that was talking about, we're grieving as individuals, as a community, as a world, actually. So I think that's important to acknowledge, especially for those who have had early experiences of grief and loss. So it may be more resonant now. Many of my clients who were adopted that are in reunion are anxious or grieving about meetings that they had planned for the next few months to maybe meet biological relatives for the first time. Others who aren't in reunion are anxious wondering, will they ever get to, will they ever get to the place of being in reunion? There's just this very, very uncertain time. A couple of the teens that I work with that were adopted are expressing so much worry and anxiety about that their adoptive parents could get sick, and then they would lose them. So I think it's just important to emphasize that whatever you're feeling is okay, and it's okay to not feel okay. I've been up since 4 a.m. because I don't even, I can't even put my finger on it, but there's just it's in the air, the anxiety. So, and I use some of what I'm going to share with you to calm my nervous system down, to activate what we call the parasympathetic nervous system, which is the brakes of the nervous system. So it's okay to not feel okay. When you're not feeling okay, reach out and know that like all of our thoughts and feelings, some of it's just brain chatter, and it will pass, and that we're all, it's being said over and over, but we are all in this together, and we are definitely all in this together as an adoptive and foster community. So Jon Kabat-Zinn is a psychologist who, I think this is a very apropos quote. He said, "You can't stop the waves, but you can learn how to surf." So some of these resources or these tools we can consider as a surfing exercise. So again, ways to heal and promote resilience and engage the brain, the rewiring of the brain towards a more resilient state. And there are many ways, and I'm just going to cover a few, but one is what we're doing right now. It's finding community, finding your tribe, people that understand you, a safe place to give and get support. Sometimes that's in person, and sometimes it's online. So in a setting like this, or their Facebook groups, online support groups, are obviously increasing right now because of what's happening. Workshops, again, like this one, safe activities, I'm going to mention some indoor, some outdoor, but singing, dancing, journaling, art, projects, playing is good, listening to music. For me, it's cooking or baking is one of my go-tos. Telling your story. So being able to tell your story and having someone witness that is very powerful. And I'm not talking about writing a book. I know that there's so many things going around on social media that, everybody's closets are clean and people are working on their novel. That may be true for some people, but I think for the majority of people, we're sort of just, we're just getting through each day as we can. But just speaking your story and having, like I said, having another person witness it can be really, really healing. Embrace spirituality if that's something that's important to you. Move your body. And I'm not talking about training for a marathon, but just moving your body, walking, running, dancing, hiking. If you can't be outside, do something indoors. Exercise is probably the number one mood regulator, because it increases the feel-good endorphins in the brain. So even if it's just a little bit, it can be really helpful. Trauma-informed yoga is very, very helpful as well. Breathe. So a lot of times, if our nervous systems, if we're out of what I call our window of tolerance, we're not even breathing properly. So being able to slow down and do what's called a belly breath, which is actually breathing into the belly, not just diaphragmatic breathing. I don't know if any of you know it's 4-7-8. So it's inhale for 4 seconds, hold your breath for 7 seconds, exhale for 8. That's a lot to remember if you're feeling anxious. So just have your exhalation be longer than your inhalation. So just breathing in and then exhaling for a few counts longer can really, really activate the parasympathetic nervous system. So all these are very simple, but they can be really helpful. Right now, I think one thing that can be really helpful if we think about, for many of us, a lot of things have been out of our control. So for adoptees, and for first parents, and for everyone, things perhaps have felt out of control. And so when something that is globally out of our control in many ways, that can be very activating. So just practicing some kind of routine, getting up each day, getting dressed each day, setting small goals where you feel like you do have some sense of control. So rather than getting up and saying, I'm going to clean the closet, so I'm going to clean a drawer, and give yourself credit for that completion of that task, and doing something that's very much in your control, manageable goals. These are kind of, I think, givens: healthy diet, good sleep regime, and relaxation. There's something called bilateral music, and some of these things that I'm going to mention, you can find again on my website, and I'll post something after tonight too, just a list of some of these things that I'm mentioning. But bilateral music is very, very, very relaxing, and it's simply music that goes left, right, left, right. So it's melodic music, but it's going from one ear to the other, which is bilateral stimulation, which is something that is a part of EMDR. I'm a kind of therapy that I'll talk about in a few minutes, but that can be very, very, very regulating. Another really, really good tool is practicing mindful awareness. And this is a term I think that gets kind of thrown around a lot, especially now. But really what the practice of mindful awareness is paying attention to the moment in the moment. So we're the only species that spends more time thinking about the past and worrying about the future. And while it's okay to think about the past and plan for the future, when either of those kind of hijacks what's happening in the moment, it's not useful. So there's guided ways to practice mindful awareness. There's apps, but it's really a way to focus your attention and build. I mean, it's good for immunity. It's good for attention. It's good for overall health. Some of my favorite apps are Insight Timer, UCLA Mindful Awareness Research Center, Headspace, Calm. And again, you don't have to write them down. I'll post them. But that can be really, really, really helpful. Practicing self-compassion, talking to ourselves like we would a good friend. So if you don't get the closet clean, you don't start shoulding, I should have done this or I should have done that. It's being gentle with yourself, like you would a friend who's in pain or suffering. Another option is work with an adoption-informed therapist. So I think it's really important for our community to find, if we decide to go to therapy, to find someone who has lived our experience or has been educated about our experience. And I'm guessing some of you have worked with therapists. I know I did for many years, who never really gave validation to my early experience of being separated from my birth mother, being in foster care and then adopted. I was just considered an anxious kid. But working with an adoption-informed therapist, I think, can be really helpful. Sometimes talk therapy isn't enough because trauma is generally stored in a part of the brain that isn't accessed by talk therapy. So if you do decide to go to therapy, you may want to work with someone who's trained in brain-based therapy with a somatic element. So EMDR is really effective. It stands for eye movement desensitization and reprocessing. So again, bilateral stimulation of the left and right hemisphere of the brain. I'm trained in that, and I'm also trained in another therapy called brain spotting, which works with points in a person's field of vision. And I could talk about those more, but if you have any questions, you can always reach out to me. But their talk therapy is fantastic, but sometimes it doesn't access where the part of the brain where trauma is stored. There are a lot of other things that you can do, but these are just a handful. And what I'm just looking at the time, and what I'd like to do, if you're all open, and I know I can't see any of you, but this is an exercise that I do with my clients that you can do in the comfort of your home. You can do it. You can teach your kids this. It's a resourcing exercise. So I'm just going to pretend that everyone says yes, they want to do it. And what I'm going to have you do, I think you can all see me, is it's called the butterfly hug. So you just put your hands on, you cross your arms and put one hand on each shoulder. And we're going to work with tapping alternately. So very slowly, whatever feels nice. But if you just, if you feel comfortable, you can close your eyes, but just kind of take a couple breaths and bring to mind a place that this can be a real place, an imagined place, a place you've been, a place you want to go, a place you've seen in a movie, but a place that when you bring to mind is calm or peaceful. And just picture yourself there and notice what time of day it is, what the sky or air is like. Notice any smells or sounds. And while you're doing that, just continue tapping alternately on your shoulders, kind of embracing yourself in a hug. And next, bring to mind a person, and this can be a person, a real or imagined person, animal, spiritual figure, someone or something that represents nurturing. So it might be someone that took care of you or someone you took care of, but just a nurturing figure. And imagining them caring for you. And the next resource is, again, person, animal, spiritual figure, someone or something that represents protection. So this might be actually someone who protected you, but it also might just be a symbol, character from a movie or a book. Again, just feeling that sense of being protected. And then the last resource, again, a person, animal, spiritual figure, symbol, someone or something that represents wisdom. And just noticing how it feels as you're receiving this wisdom. And then if it feels okay, bringing together your wise figure, your protective figure, your nurturing figure, having them join you in your peaceful place. And we'll call this your resource team. And just noticing them all there around you. And then when it feels okay, just coming back, noticing where you are, noticing your feet on the ground, your back against a chair, or sofa, or pillow. So I do have 2 questions that someone sent to Betsy earlier, which I'll answer. And I don't know if anyone else has questions, and if you want to type, or I don't know if you want them to unmute themselves. Either way is fine with me. But one person, the first question that I have is, someone asked, are there any mental exercises a person can do to improve focus and concentration? Mindful awareness practice. I promise. And it's, again, it's a way, a way to focus attention, and it's a way of feeling like you have control over your thoughts and feelings rather than being controlled by them. So that's a really succinct way of putting it, that you are in control of your thoughts and feelings most of the time, and not feeling like you're controlled by them. So it's one example is watching clouds pass in the sky. So you can watch the clouds pass in the sky. Those are your thoughts and feelings, and you can pick the ones that you want to focus your attention on. Or another analogy is leaves floating down a stream. So you can watch your thoughts and feelings, and you can name them, and you can pick the ones that you want to look at more closely, but you don't have to jump in the stream and float down with them. The second question was, what are ways single people can cope with the absence of physical touch, like hugs from others during this time of isolation and physical distancing? Yeah, that's hard. And I think this butterfly hug, that's one way. I mean, these sound corny, but that's actually very regulating to the nervous system. Showers, baths, using scented lotions and giving yourself a hand massage, a foot massage. Again, we're just working on getting through this. But those are the ways that I would suggest. Someone just gave me a thumbs up. Thumbs up. Does anyone else have any questions?
So people can unmute and ask a question, but be aware you will be on the recording if you do that. Or if you'd prefer, you can use chat or you can email me. Questions or discussion?
Yeah, questions or discussion, absolutely.
I guess in terms of discussion, I'll throw one thing out there. You mentioned trauma-informed yoga, and I thought that was interesting. I've spent part of this time like exploring different yoga resources online. I typically go to an in-person class, but there's so much out there online, and so now I'm wondering how I missed that all these years.
Yeah,
but there's lots of really good, so if people haven't explored that, just in terms of, it's one of the hardest parts for me is not having as much physical activity as I usually do, just in the course of daily life. And so stretching and yoga has been really helpful for me.
Yeah, I think there's so many online resources. I also think another practice for relaxation, and especially sleep. So a lot of times when people are going through a stressful or an anxiety-producing time, sleep can be compromised. And the practice of yoga nidra is a really good one. And you can just Google it, yoga and then Nidra. And it's not, you do it while you're lying in bed. So it's not a strenuous practice at all, but it can be very, very soothing. So I need to see this. People have asked questions, but I'm not seeing them. Oh, okay. Okay. So one person shared that she or he had an unexpected emotional response to the butterfly hug exercise, that it felt good. Thank you. So I'm glad that it felt good. Sometimes that the bilateral stimulation, whether it's music or the tapping, can be activating. So I'm glad that was a good experience for you. Another person said, any other quick exercises to calm anxiety or stress in the moment? I love the tapping. So any grounding exercise. So a lot of times, so anxiety is really when we're tapped out of our window of tolerance. So the window of tolerance is a band we like to stay in most of the time, and we can either get tapped out above, and that's anxiety, or sometimes sink below the window of tolerance, and that's more depression. So in moments of anxiety, to calm is practice feeling your feet on the ground, or back against the chair, looking around the room, naming 5 things. So again, we're bringing yourself back into the space, into the present. So with both sensation, I can feel my feet on the ground, I feel my back against the chair, looking around the room, I see a picture, I see the door, I see the window, and again, just bringing yourself back into the present. Cold water on your hands can also be really helpful. Essential oils, rosemary, lavender, those are sometimes helpful too.
So, Hi, I had a question. Oh, sorry.
Oh,
if you want to get back to the other one.
No, please.
Okay. My name's Meredith. Thank you for being here. So I'm currently in therapy I'm doing it for my anxiety and stuff, but I'm doing acceptance and commitment therapy, and I'm loving it. It sounds similar to some of the methods I've used to what you're saying and everything. But I guess my question is, I know that I have trauma, and you suggested an adoption knowledgeable therapist. But how do we know, like, I'm obviously making progress in this therapy and it's working really well for me, but how do I know if I need to work on further traumas? Just listen to what my therapist says, or maybe once I've made progress, say, I think I still have traumas, or is that kind of picking at the scab? I don't know.
I think there are questions that people can ask their therapist is, does your therapist consider, and again, I don't necessarily think adoption is a trauma, but the trauma is that early separation, right? The early separation of mom and baby. And then does your therapist acknowledge that is traumatic, that is traumatic? I mean, to me, it's undeniably traumatic, right? So what we know is that in that separation, the levels of cortisol are rushing through the bloodstream of both baby and mom, and baby needs familiar mom to comfort and soothe him or her. So that's the first question I would ask a therapist, is do you consider that trauma? And then also taking into account how pre-verbal, if the trauma happened, if that separation trauma happened pre-verbally before the child has the words to describe the event, it's just encoded in the nervous system. So does the therapist understand implicit memory, working with pre-verbal trauma? Those are some of the questions that I would ask right off the bat. And if they say no, I mean, I'm not going to say that you should in this, if you're getting something out of it, clearly that's helpful, but that just might be something to ask later on down the road, just to say, do you buy this? Do you believe in this? And if not, I mean, like I said, I was in therapy for years, and my therapist it didn't occur to her to even really be curious about it. And again, that was a long time ago, but there are therapists still today that think babies don't remember anything until they actually can talk about the memories, and that you were adopted in a good home, and that's what you don't want to hear from a therapist.
Yeah. Okay. Well, I'm in the clear on that, because they've been good and validating then. So
beautiful.
Thank you.
You're welcome. So another person just asked the question, I have 2 teenage boys, both are adopted, and they say this whole thing doesn't bother them. They miss their friends, but are not apparently stressed. So that sounds like teenagers, right? So in some ways. So I think the relevance of adoption and separation trauma comes at different times. So I think if, as parents, you're talking about it and letting your kids know that it's on your mind, that it gives them the opportunity to just know that. And right now that may not be necessarily on their mind, but as parents, I think you can act you can act curiously, and you can offer things. You can say things like, I wonder if maybe this is difficult for you because, or I wonder if this is ever on your mind. And again, you're not telling them how they feel, but you're just expressing a curiosity. So Betsy, I don't see you on the screen anymore, and I don't know if
I'm
that's
still here. I don't know.
Oh, okay, perfect. There you are. Do you have any other questions? Did anyone send you any other questions?
Let me double check. Not the last time I saw. Nope, I haven't gotten any others. So we have one that somebody's interested in knowing more about EMDR.
So EMDR, like I said, stands for eye movement desensitization and reprocessing. And it was developed by a therapist many years ago, I think probably almost 30 years ago, Francine Shapiro, as a therapy to work with trauma survivors. And the acronym, eye movement desensitization and reprocessing, she developed it using tracking with eyes, so so she developed it by, she was thinking about something. This is her account. So she was thinking about something and walked through a park, and as she was walking, she noticed that her eyes were kind of going back and forth as she walked. And when she returned, she had a sense of, there was a shift in what she was, the troubling thing that she was thinking about. And then she spent years after that testing this idea of intentionally tracking with one's eyes, if it helped alleviate stress and trauma. Since then, it's been tested, and people do the tracking with the eyes, but they also you can do tapping with little pulsars that you hold in your hand. You can listen to tones, but the idea is that it's integrating the parts of the brain. So it's integrating the left and the right hemisphere. It's also integrating the cortical region and the subcortical regions of the brain, so that all parts of the brain are integrated and communicating together. And again, it's the idea of what happened is very important, but it's how we come to make sense of ourselves in the world. That's the negative kind of beliefs about ourselves in the world. That's the real point. So I can give a really kind of a tied up in a bow version of EMDR, but a person might come in and say that so for adoptees, a lot of their negative beliefs are around, I'm not lovable, people leave, I can't trust. So if someone came in with those beliefs, I might say, and again, this is a really tied up version. First, I would get to know them and get their history and develop a rapport. But if we were doing the EMDR, the setup might be, as you're thinking about, can you tell me a time that you remember when your issues of trust were betrayed? And so we'll work with a memory, and within that memory, I'll ask, so when you're thinking about that memory, what's a picture? Take just a snapshot of the most distressful part of that memory. And as you're picturing that in your mind's eye, what do you notice in your body? What are the emotions around it? And what do you believe to be true? So the picture might be, if we're working with people not trust, maybe a time someone lied to her, and she's picturing, herself crying. What does she notice in her body? So again, trauma, we want to connect the head to the body. So a lot of times people who have experienced trauma don't have a lot of connection to their felt sense. So she pictures herself crying. She says her chest is tight. What are the emotions? Sadness. and what do you believe to be true? I can't trust. So with those 4 pieces held together, we begin the bilateral stimulation, whether it's tracking with the eyes or listening to bilateral tones or holding these little tappers. And what eventually happens when we get out of our own way, the brain wants to move towards wholeness and healing. So we do sets, and it's kind of like sitting on a train and watching scenes go by. So the brain just generates images, maybe connected memories. And what eventually happens is the person is able to say, yeah, that happened, but it's not happening now. There are more times I've been able to trust than not. Not everyone is not trustworthy. So that the negative cognition is changed to a positive one. And the person doesn't have a sense. So traumatic memories aren't memories at all. They're active in the present. So what a process like EMDR does is it reprocesses the memory to where it's stored in the brain now in a way that the person can look back and say, that happened, but it's not happening now. I don't have physiological distress when I think about it. It doesn't create grief or loss, feelings of grief or loss in the present. It's an actual memory. And I know it sounds kind of like voodoo, but it's really not. It's really such a powerful therapy. And someone asked about brain spotting too. So brain spotting is an offshoot of EMDR developed by a longtime EMDR practitioner. And he was doing EMDR with a client that he had been working with for years. And she was an ice skater, and she was having trouble with, triple toe loop or something like that. And so he was doing EMDR with her. And when she was tracking with her eyes, and at one point he noticed that her eyes kind of, what he called, wobbled. And so he just had this instinct to hold his hand there and invited her just to notice that spot. And as she did, she recounted some events that they'd never talked about in the therapy in the years that they'd worked together. And as a result, the next day was able to complete this move. So again, that's kind of tied up in a very neat bow. But the idea is we all brain spot. So I might be trying to remember a phone number when I'm talking to you, and I might look up. I might say, oh, I can't remember it, and look up, and then I can recall the phone number. So the idea is where we look affects how we feel. And when we can intentionally, in terms of trauma memory, I invite the person, when you're thinking about that, what do you notice in your body? Oh, a tightness in my chest. And then we intentionally find a spot in their field of vision where the activation is higher, and invite them to notice that spot and allow whatever to come up. And generally the activation lowers rather quickly. Again, it sounds crazy, but they're really, really powerful tools. Powerful therapies. They're not even tools.
Okay. Any other questions or comments?
I'd be curious, has anyone that's on the call, has anyone done either of those therapies, EMDR or brain spotting?
I was going to start EMDR with one therapist that she ended up changing jobs and locations. And so we had just done like my safe space activity and some of the tapping, and she was going to do the things that you hold.
Yeah, the little tappers.
Yes. And so I was really sad to see her go to a different position, because I was really looking forward to the EMDR. But then since then, I went to another therapy place and started the acceptance and commitment therapy.
Yeah.
And that's helped a whole lot.
That's great.
But I would still be curious about the EMDR stuff and brain spotting. It still sounds interesting to me. So Thanks.
Thank you. Okay, so let's see. Someone just tap. How does neurofeedback fit with these? So neurofeedback is I'm familiar with it. I'm not trained in it. So I don't even really want to answer too much because it fits well. It's another somatic based therapy. And I don't know if any of you have read Julie Lopez's book, Live Empowered. She is a fellow adopted person and a therapist. And in her book, which is very good, by the way, she talks about EMDR, brain spotting, and neurofeedback. So neurofeedback is you're connected with some electrodes, and it again, I'm not super familiar, but I know it's an effective therapy, and I know it's an effective therapy. Is there a specific certification or standardization for an adoptee competent therapist? Not really. I think it's just advocating, being your own advocate and asking questions. I mean, there are a couple, Center for Adoption Support and Education does have a training, but there aren't any specific, like, standardized training. And there will be, I think there will be. There are enough of us now that are wanting to get that to happen. Does anyone else have any questions or comments or? You're welcome. Someone just thank you.
Somebody else ask a question, because I could go on with questions for days. I do have a question.
Okay.
I wanted to know, like, with your being an adoptee, how did your awareness of your adoptee journey affect your career decision to do this as a career?
Well, I think the primary thing that happened, or the primary reason, was being in my own personal therapy and really, I mean, suffering anxiety most of my life. That was just never, no one ever thought to bring up adoption. And I joke, even though this might not seem funny to some people, but I like to say that the only person that didn't know that I was adopted was my adoptive mom. And that's just how deep her denial was, and very much in the fog. And I was very much in the fog. So, but just had so much anxiety just my whole life, and was in therapy. My therapist helped me with practical tools and, with a little bit about anxiety, but adoption was never brought up. And when I decided to go back to grad school, it all came together. I was in the fog, but I was coming out, and then I was in reunion, and I started to put the pieces together and worked with a therapist that helped me do so, and just realized, like, wow, I spent a lot of time and money in therapy that wasn't really addressing what needed to be addressed. And, really thought about, when I started in private practice, I had just a general practice, trauma informed, but then it just decided, this is the community I want to work with. And so, my personal experience isn't unique, but it does inform, some of how I work professionally. Not just doing the work with people who are adopted, but working with adoptive parents and helping them find the words and the language, and helping them, see their children's behaviors through the lens of adoption, and again, really helping them be their child's best advocate, which is what I consider adoptive parents ideally to be. Does that answer your question?
Yes, very much so. And it brought up another one. So the reunion part, I'm currently in reunion with my biological father, but I just before this whole COVID-19 thing happened, on Friday the 13th, I decided to call his wife and tell the wife that I exist, because she didn't know of my existence. And so he's quarantined and in the doghouse big time with his wife, because they were married while I was conceived. But I guess, how do you go work through trauma during reunion? Because that wasn't an easy thing to do. It wasn't traumatic, but some of his words that led me up to this, some of those experiences, parts of it were traumatic. So what do you have to say about that and the reunion?
That's a really big question. And I think reunion is often so complex and multi-layered. And I think sometimes people view reunion as the destination, the goal. And really what I say, not just me, but I think a lot of other people would agree that it's the beginning of another phase. So when I'm working with clients who are in reunion, it's tailored to them, right? So, and are the biological relatives, whether they're parents or siblings or cousins, are they in the fog? Are they still in the fog? Because the healing can take place with two people. It's sometimes hard to take place, if you're trying to have a relationship with someone who's not, who's still in the fog. That can be really difficult. So that part I might encourage you to work with, someone who can help you navigate that, and again, tailored to what you want and need. I think sometimes as people who are adopted, and often, and maybe first parents too, but again, so much out of our control. And so you want to make sure that reunion feels like each person has a voice and that there's room for everyone at the table. I think another place to go, I don't know if all of you are familiar with the podcast Adoptees On, but I've been on a few calls with Haley, and I think that's a great resource. I do virtual groups with adult adoptees and adoptive parents and first parents, not all together, but just, finding, again, back to what I'd offered earlier, but just finding a community. So part of those groups, you can talk with others who are in reunion. What's worked, what's not worked? What do you suggest? How can I say this? And that just, again, feeling felt and feeling heard and feeling understood.
Well, I'm all the way in Kentucky, and then most of the people in the group are in Cleveland, and I do the virtual monthly web chat with them. And yeah. I'm like, you guys are stuck with me. So they're all probably quietly laughing while they're on mute at me.
No,
questions.
I don't think, I'm guessing they're not. I'm guessing that you're asking you're asking questions that probably other people have as well.
Yeah, I would validate that, Meredith. You found your tribe, so you're good. So I'm going to wrap things up unless anybody has one last question.
And please feel free to reach out to me. I usually do a pretty good job of getting back to people quickly, and email me or yeah, that would be probably the best. Just email me at Leslie, no E, Lesli at askadoption.com.
Great. Well, thank you. And again, Leslie's website is lesliejohnson.com and askadoption.com. So you can get more information there. We will also post the video of this evening along with the resources, Leslie, that you mentioned. We can put those on our website along with the video. So I want to thank everybody for joining us this evening. It was really great to have so many people and such a good discussion and lots of valuable content. As many of you know, Adoption Network Cleveland is a nonprofit organization. We serve individuals and families impacted by adoption, kinship, and foster care. We're very excited to be having so many experts join us for these Monday evening series. So watch for the next ones that come out. We are a membership organization, and we do hope that you consider joining. You can find out more about our organization and our other services and programs at adoptionnetwork.org. As Meredith mentioned, we do have virtual support meetings, actually multiple times a month. We've had one once a month for a long time, and the others have been in person. Right now, they're all virtual. So you can check out those on our calendar, as well as other programs that we have. And next week, you can join us here on Monday evening while we host author Kate Vogel with her presentation, which is entitled on the ups and downs of your adoption story, you should write a book. So again, thank you so much, Leslie.
Oh, thank you.
Be here with you tonight.
Thanks.
Thanks,
Bye,
everybody.
everyone.